Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the people of Morocco are suffering and its youth are shouting in the streets. Dozens of top voices from across society back an open letter to the king calling for change, and that Gen Z protesters driving weeks of protest demanding economic reform are heard. Also, campaigns are in full swing in Cameroon. Seven-time President Paul Biya's been almost invisible since the start of his bid for an eighth run in the polls on the 12th. Despite his absence, he remains a frontrunner. And Kenyan exporters worried about the fading of the flower export market to Europe meet in Nairobi to thrash out how best to make the COMESA regional common market cultivate fresh blossoms for the horticulture sector. We hear from our correspondent in the city. But first, Moroccan academics, artists, human rights activists and other influential public figures are amongst the 60 people who signed an open letter sent to King Mohammed VI on Wednesday, calling for reforms in response to the youth-led protests that have been flourishing in the country since beginning late September. The movement, called GenZ 212, is born of an online collective demanding better schools and healthcare, but also calling out institutional corruption and demanding that Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch quit.
We are here simply to ask for better education, to also ask for better health for everyone in Morocco. And as a Moroccan citizen, I am saying that I am fully ready to fight for my country.
We came out for the people, not only for the young, for everyone. Young people must be able to benefit from a good education. Older people must be able to find good hospitals. We're not against the country or against the construction of stadiums or opera houses, but just as we want to be proud of these kinds of achievements, we also want to be proud of our hospitals and our universities.
Now, rallies were suspended this week ahead of a huge demonstration strategically planned for Thursday, the day before the King's annual speech. But for a look at the overall landscape, I'm now joined from New York by Moroccan journalist Aida Alami. Aida, thanks so much for making the time to speak to me. Now, first of all, what do you think is driving this current incarnation of discontent? 14 years ago or so, the Arab Spring protests led to changes in the Moroccan constitution. Do you see any links between what happened in 2011 and the unrest we're seeing today?
I mean, in 2011, the protests were organized at first by politically savvy organizations. What the difference we're seeing today is that this is a grassroots movement that started online by young people who are fed up economically. In 2011, the demands were at first predominantly political, but now it's people are unemployed. They want better healthcare, better education, and they seem to be really well organized. When you look at Discord, they have all these channels per cities, and they organize really well to know when they're going to protest and so on. And they're really determined, and they seem like they have very little to lose.
So we saw this open letter sent by big voices from across Moroccan society on Wednesday. Do you think that's likely to make any difference? What's your take overall on the government's strategy when it comes to responding to these demonstrations?
I think, to answer your first question about the letter, I think it's important that it exists. I spoke to several protesters last week who had been arrested, and they told me that it was important for them to feel support, not just through words, but also feel that they weren't on their own on the street and taking all the heat from the authorities and the crackdown. I think it's hard to know if the regime is going to answer in any way to these demands. We've seen over the years that they don't react well to pressure. They don't really like to be asked to do things, and they like to do things on their own terms. But for sure, I read the letter today, and it lays out some very basic and reasonable demands. And I don't see why they wouldn't be listened to.
But more generally, one of the things I thought was super interesting about that you raised earlier was your concern that the authorities have a very specific intention of dividing and conquering. Have you seen any evidence of that in the response since these latest protests began in September?
Absolutely. So we saw at first a bit of an absurd response where they would just jail absolutely everyone. These were the first days of the protests. Some folks were arrested just for merely speaking to the media on a sidewalk. And then there were more clashes, violent clashes. We've seen the death of 3 people. So the escalation was really extreme. And then there was a de-escalation. And I'm seeing what I've seen the regime do countless time, which is co-opt, deflate, and undermine. And now they're inviting young people to come speak on TV. More unions are joining the movement. And I mean, traditionally, I've always seen the regime completely take over these movements, and I'm waiting to see what they're going to do this time, or actually listen to the demands of the streets, because these waves of protests keep on coming, and they'll never go away unless there are real answers to the demands. And these are big problems that will not be resolved with small solutions.
So in this kind of complicated landscape, what for you are the real elements to watch going forward?
I think we need to see. The king's going to speak on Friday. There's a lot of speculation about what he's going to say. I personally, I'm not expecting a big acknowledgement of what the youth is demanding. There's probably going to be some kind of siding with their demand and agreeing with them. We've seen that in several of his speeches, where he kind of agrees with everything they say. But it'll be interesting to see if actually there's going to be any big gesture that's done, and one of them would be to dismiss the current prime minister.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Aida Alami, there, helping us break down some of the dynamics behind the weeks of protests that we've seen in Morocco, led by Gen Z protesters. Quick look at some news in brief now. Medics in the besieged Sudanese city of Darfur say that at least 20 people have been killed over 24 hours in drone and artillery strikes on one of the last functioning hospitals. The RSF paramilitary, which has been at war with the army since 2023, has been trying to seize El Fasher from their rivals. It's the last state capital to hold out against the RSF, and activists trying to help civilians stuck there say conditions in the city are so bad that it's become an open-air morgue. The conflict has created the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Also, rights groups Amnesty International's calling on the Tanzanian government to disclose the fate and whereabouts of a missing former ambassador who became a critic of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's administration. Humphrey Polepole had been Tanzania's ambassador to Cuba since 2013, but he resigned in July after accusing his government of human rights abuses. On Monday, his brother posted a video accusing police of having violently abducted the diplomat. President Suluhu Hassan's faced increasing accusation of repression ahead of the October 29th general election. 8 employees of the international NGO safety organization, the INSO, have been arrested in Burkina Faso on charges of espionage and treason. 4 foreign and 4 local staff are accused of collecting sensitive information. The Netherlands-based outfit denies this. Burkina Faso also accuses INSO of having kept up operations after the government ordered its suspension back in July. Now to Cameroon, where campaigns are in full swing ahead of elections due to happen on the 12th. 7-time President Paul Biya has been almost invisible since the start of his bid for an 8th term, but despite this, he remains the frontrunner. Our correspondent sent us this report from the campaign trail.
He is the opposition candidate who has been drawing crowds since the start of the campaigns ahead of the presidential polls. 76-year-old Issa Chiroma Bakari, who served the Paul Biya regime for more than 20 years, now presents himself as the most serious opponent.
Le 13, il faudrait que tous ceux qui sont à étudier là, qu'ils commencent à faire leurs valises.
A combative speech that seems to convince young voters like this one.
We want change. Please help us. We know they'll try to rig the polls, but we're going to watch closely. We're tired of this. 43 years and nothing to show.
Like Issa Chiroma, Bello Boba Maigari has been an ally of the ruling party for more than 30 years. Here, he is at a meeting in Gaoundéré in the Adamawa region. For the UNDP candidate, the turnout will be decisive.
100% de participation nous assurera une victoire le 12 octobre et je vous remercie.
Incumbent Paul Biya again made an appearance in Marwa in the far north region, where he urged his supporters to vote for him to carry on with the ruling party's legacy. 92-year-old Paul Biya presented himself as the man for the top job he has occupied for the past 42 years.
J'ai eu l'occasion de vous dire que ma détermination à vous servir demeurait intacte. Je voudrais le réaffirmer aujourd'hui dans cette belle région qui m'accueille si chaleureusement et qui ne m'a jamais ménagé son soutien.
Over 8 million Cameroonian voters are expected to go to the polls on October 12 to elect one candidate who will be president for the next 7 years.
Well, Kenya is currently heading up the COMESA economic bloc for East and Southern Africa. There are 21 states in the common market, all invested in a gathering currently underway in Nairobi, focusing on keeping exports flowing to the EU. Over the past 2 years, East African exports of horticultural and agricultural products to Europe have dropped by half. And this is particularly worrying to the conference hosts. Bastien Renouy breaks it all down for us.
It's not the first time that the Kenyan industry is affected by new EU regulations, but in the past, Kenyan farmers have adapted successfully. So the flower industry believe that they will succeed one more time with the help of this COMESA forum. Kenyan Minister of Trade said that the goal of the forum is not only to help Kenyans, but also to develop exports for other members. He also said that the goal is to develop a domestic market between COMESA members. He said that if we are able to trade together, to work together, then we will develop together.
In many farms, the use of pesticides have been reduced by over 40%. And for us, that is major. So that is an example. If you look at the use of water, we are collecting water every drop in the farm. They need to give us confidence that indeed we have made many strides and we are on the way to being closer to where they expect us to be. And in the coming 10 years, we believe that we should be the very best.
The flower industry is a key sector here in Kenya. Kenyan flowers, especially roses, are shipped daily to the EU. They represent more than 40% of flowers sold within the European Union. And it contributes more than 3 billion euros to the Kenyan economy every year. But recently, these exports have dropped sharply because of stricter EU regulations on pesticides. The COMESA summit will address this issue.
Bastien Renouy there for us. And before we leave, a quick update on the happenings in football for the continent. Liverpool star Mohamed Salah scored twice to help Egypt beat Djibouti 3-0 in Casablanca on Wednesday and qualify for the 2026 World Cup. Meanwhile, Cape Verde will have to wait for its showdown with Eswatini on next Monday before getting a chance to secure a first ever World Cup spot after it drew 3-3 with Libya on Wednesday. Well, that's it for the show, An Eye on Africa. Do join us again if you can. Till then, take care.